There are moments in life when a single glance can shatter everything you thought you knew about yourself. For Rick Denver, that moment arrived when he saw a 6-year-old girl with the same birthmark he'd had his entire life on her arm. A unique mark, impossible to fake, impossible to explain. "Are you my dad?" the little girl asked, her innocence completely paralyzing him. In his 35 years, Rick had built an empire. He had high-rises in Beverly Hills, bank accounts he could never empty, and the respect of the most powerful men in America. But never, not even in his worst nightmares, did he imagine a stranger would leave him speechless with such a simple question. Because that mark wasn't a coincidence. That girl hadn't appeared by chance. And hidden behind her brown eyes was a secret involving the only woman he'd ever truly loved. Dove, the woman he'd abandoned 7 years ago for ambition. The woman he believed lost forever. The woman who now had a daughter with his blood. This is the story of a billionaire who lost his soul chasing success, and of a twist of fate that would force him to confront the most painful truth of his life. That the love he'd destroyed for money was the only thing that truly mattered. A truth some are willing to kill to hide. Rick Denver adjusted his Italian tie for the 3rd time as he walked among the children at the Benito Juarez Elementary School in East Los Angeles. The company photographer yelled instructions from afar, but he barely heard. He just wanted to get through this charity event, return to his Beverly Hills office, and forget places like this existed. "Mr. Denver, please stand in the center with the children," his assistant shouted as she organized the photo session. Rick sighed. It was all part of the show. The successful billionaire helping the needy, the perfect image for business magazines. But then he saw her. A little girl with dark hair and huge eyes approached to fix her shoes right in front of him. When she raised her left arm, Rick felt the world stop. There it was. The same birthmark he had, exactly the same, an irregular star shape, about the size of a coin. "God," he murmured, unable to look away. The girl looked up and saw him watching her. Without fear, with that natural curiosity of children, she came closer. "Whose kid are you, little one?" Rick asked, his voice cracking. "I'm Sophie," she replied with a smile. "My mom says my dad has a star like mine on his arm. Do you have a star?" Rick froze. Slowly, he rolled up his sleeve, revealing his birthmark. Sophie's eyes lit up as if she'd found treasure. "You do, just like mine!" she exclaimed excitedly. Then, with the devastating innocence of a child, she asked, "Are you my dad?" Rick's heart completely stopped. The noise of the event disappeared. Only those brown eyes looking at him with hope existed. I, he stammered, unable to form a coherent word. "Sophie, come here!" a teacher called from afar. The girl smiled and ran off, leaving Rick paralyzed in the middle of the playground. "Are you all right, sir?" the photographer asked. But Rick didn't hear anything. He could only think of one thing. That mark couldn't be a coincidence, and if that girl was really his daughter, where was the mother? His mind raced to a name he hadn't spoken in years. Dove. Rick arrived at his office like a hurricane. He slammed the door so hard that the paintings trembled on the walls. His assistant Martha followed him, worried. "Mr. Denver, is everything all right? You look very pale." "Martha," Rick said without looking at her, pacing like a caged lion. "I need you to investigate everything about a girl. Her name is Sophie. She was at today's event." "Investigate a girl, sir?" "Everything," he shouted, slamming his fist on the desk. "Her full name, where she lives, who her mother is. I want it by tomorrow." Martha nodded nervously and ran out. Rick slumped into his chair, covering his face with his hands. The image of that birthmark wouldn't leave his head. It was impossible. It had to be impossible, but he knew it wasn't. His phone rang. It was Daniel, his partner. "How'd it go with the little poor kids?" Daniel joked. "Daniel, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest." "Sure, what's up?" "Birthmarks like mine, are they hereditary?" There was silence on the other end. "Yeah, Rick, usually yes. Why do you ask?" Rick hung up without answering. The next day, Martha entered his office with a folder in her hands and a look like she'd seen a ghost. "Sir, I have the information you requested. Give it to me." Martha swallowed hard. "The girl's name is Sophie Herrera, 6 years old. She lives in East Los Angeles with her mother." "What's the mother's name?" Martha stared at him before answering, as if the words were about to explode. "Dove Herrera." Rick's world crumbled. "No!" he screamed, leaping up violently. "Dove, no! This can't be happening. Sir, there's something else." "What?" "The girl was born exactly 7 years after you stopped seeing Miss Dove." Rick fell completely silent. The numbers were perfect. Too perfect. Dove had had a daughter, his daughter, and she'd never told him. Rick spent 3 sleepless nights, 3 nights pacing his Beverly Hills apartment, staring at the city lights that no longer seemed bright. He had to see her. He had to confront her. He had to know the truth. Wednesday morning he drove to East Los Angeles. The streets grew narrower, poorer. How different this was from his world of high rises and expensive restaurants. He found the address, Diner Doña Rose, home-style food. A small place with plastic tables and the smell of freshly made tortillas hanging in the air. And there she was. Dove emerged from the kitchen with a tray full of plates. 7 years later, she was still beautiful, but she looked tired, very tired. Her hair was pulled back, and she wore an apron stained with sauce. Their eyes met across the crowded diner. Dove froze. The tray trembled in her hands. Rick walked toward her slowly, his heart pounding like a drum. "Hi, Dove," he said, his voice hoarse. Her eyes filled with rage. She slammed the tray down on a table violently. "You don't exist here," she yelled through gritted teeth. "Get out!" All eyes in the diner were on them. "Dove, we need to talk. We have nothing to talk about, nothing." "I saw your daughter," Rick said, lowering his voice. "I saw our daughter." Dove froze. Her face went white as a sheet. "Sophie is no one's but mine," she screamed, her eyes brimming with furious tears. "You have no right. You abandoned her. I didn't know she existed. Liar, you knew perfectly well what you were doing when you left me. Dove, please." "No, don't come at me with your repentant face." 7 years, Rick. 7 years I raised that girl alone. Let me explain. Explain to your wife. Explain to your perfect life." Dove moved closer, trembling with rage. "But don't explain anything to me." A customer got up, scared, and left the diner. "That birthmark," Rick began. "Don't you dare," Dove shrieked. "Don't you dare mention that mark. It's mine. Sophie is mine." She turned to leave, but Rick grabbed her arm. "Dove, wait." She spun around like a wounded animal. "Don't touch me! Never touch me again!" She broke free from his grasp and ran into the kitchen. Rick stood there, the entire diner staring at him like he was a criminal. He left slowly, but before he reached his car, he heard something that chilled him to the bone. A violent cough, desperate. He approached the kitchen window and saw Dove leaning over the sink, coughing up blood. Too much blood. Rick couldn't walk away. For a week, he went to the diner every day, ordering only coffee, watching Dove from afar. She completely ignored him, but he noticed things. The pallor of her skin, how she leaned on the tables when she thought no one was looking. That cough she tried to hide. She was sick, very sick. Thursday afternoon, he saw Sophie running from school. She was carrying a frozen backpack, and her shoes were dirty from playing. She hugged Dove's legs as if she hadn't seen her in years. "Mom, I'm home." "How was it, my love?" "Fine, although the teacher scolded Peter because he ate the glue." Dove laughed, and for a moment she looked like the woman Rick had fallen in love with. Sophie turned and saw him sitting at a corner booth. "Hey, you're the star man!" she exclaimed excitedly. Dove immediately tensed. "Sophie, come here." But the girl was already walking towards Rick with that natural confidence of children. "Can I see your star again?" she asked with bright eyes. Rick looked at Dove, who was watching them like a hawk. He slowly rolled up his sleeve. "Yes, it's the same as mine," Sophie exclaimed, showing her arm. Why do you have the same mark? Maybe God made us the same for something special, Rick replied softly. What's your name? Rick. And yours? Sophie. I'm 6. Do you have kids? Rick's heart stopped. No, not that I know of. Are you going to be my dad? She asked with that devastating innocence. Rick felt his throat closing. Do you want me to be? Yes, because you have my star, and you're very tall, and you have pretty eyes like mine. Sophie! Dove yelled from afar. Come here now! The girl obediently ran to her mother, but before leaving she yelled to Rick, I'm going to bring you a drawing tomorrow. That night, Sophie couldn't sleep from excitement. She got up at 5 in the morning and started drawing at the kitchen table. When Dove woke up, she found her daughter with crayons scattered everywhere and a huge smile. What are you drawing, my love? It's for Mr. Rick. Dove approached to see the drawing and almost fainted. It was a family, a woman, a tall man, and a little girl. At the top, in crooked letters, it said, My dad. Sophie, why did you write that? Because he has my star, Mom. That means he's my dad, right? Dove sat down slowly, her legs trembling. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that her instinct was right? It was Friday morning when Dove collapsed in the diner kitchen. Rose found her lying on the floor, blood coming from her mouth, her eyes closed. Call an ambulance, the woman yelled as she tried to lift her. Rick was in his office when Martha burst in without knocking. Sir, Mr. Denver, Dove is in the hospital. Rick ran out without asking anything else. He arrived at the general hospital like a madman, pushing doors and shouting Dove's name, until a nurse took him to room 304. There she was, pale as death, hooked up to tubes and machines. How is she? He asked the doctor who was reviewing her file. Are you a relative? I am. I am her daughter's father. The doctor looked at him seriously. She has advanced chronic bronchitis. Her lungs are very damaged. She needs immediate treatment or what? Or she doesn't have many months left. Rick felt the world collapsing. He approached the bed where Dove was beginning to open her eyes. Rick, she murmured, confused. What are you doing here? You almost died, Dove. She tried to sit up, but she didn't have the strength. Where's Sophie? She's with your neighbor. She's fine. Rick sat down beside the bed. Dove, we need to talk. Seriously, there's nothing to talk about. Tell me the truth, Dove. Is she my daughter? He shouted in desperation. Dove looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes were filled with tears. Yes, she shouted back, with all the strength she had left. She was always yours from day one. Then why didn't you tell me? Because you abandoned me, she sobbed, because you already had her. I never knew you were pregnant. I looked for you. I called you 1,000 times, Dove cried uncontrollably. But you already had Valentina. You didn't care what I felt? That's not true. It is true. You completely ignored me. Rick grabbed his head with his hands. Something didn't add up. Dove, I never received any calls from you, never. How is that possible? I called you until I was exhausted. I swear on my mother I never received a single call. They looked at each other in silence. A horrible idea began to form in Rick's mind. Dove, do you remember the number you were calling? She gave him the number. It was his personal line, the one only very close people knew. Oh God, Rick murmured. Valentina. What does Valentina have to do with it? She managed my phones back then. She said it was to protect me from distractions. Dove froze. Are you telling me that Valentina blocked your calls? That I never knew you were looking for me? That I never knew you were pregnant? The silence in the room was deafening. She separated us on purpose, Dove whispered. She destroyed us on purpose. Rick didn't sleep all night. The next day he went straight to Valentina's apartment in Santa Monica. He had keys because they had lived together until a few months ago. He entered without knocking. Valentina was having coffee on the patio, impeccably dressed as always. Seeing him, she smiled with that coldness that now gave him chills. So you found her, she said without showing surprise. How pathetic. Did you block Dove's calls? Valentina let out a short laugh. Please, Rick, don't ask questions whose answers you don't want to hear. Answer me! Yes, she shouted, getting up violently. Yes, I blocked them, and thanks to that you're a millionaire. Rick felt his blood freeze. How could you do something like that? How? Easy! That neighborhood woman was going to ruin your future. She had you spellbound with her romantic poverty. She was pregnant. Better? That way she learned not to mess with men who weren't on her level. Rick took a step toward her, trembling with rage. Stay away from them, Valentina. Or what? She mocked. Are you going to trade your empire for a neighborhood woman and her bastard? For my family, I'll trade anything. Valentina looked at him as if he were a stranger. You're not the same man I fell in love with. No, I'm not the fool who let you manipulate me anymore. Manipulate me? Valentina walked to her bag and took out an envelope. You want manipulation? Here's real manipulation. She threw the envelope at him. Rick opened it with trembling hands. They were photos. Photos of him entering and leaving the hospital. Photos of him with Sophie. Photos of him hugging Dove. But there were also other photos. Fake photos. Photos where he appeared in compromising situations that had never happened. What is this? Your destroyed future if you don't obey me, Valentina said, her eyes gleaming with malice. An anonymous call to the Los Angeles Times, another to the Millennium, and by tomorrow all of America will know that the great Rick Denver is a womanizer who abandons children. Those photos are fake. And do you think they'll care? Do you think your investors are going to investigate? Valentina approached dangerously. No, my love, they're going to run like rats. What do you want? For you to stay away? From her? From the girl? For you to disappear? You can support them financially, but from afar. No photos, no scandals, no love. You're crazy. No, I'm determined. Valentina smiled cruelly. You have 24 hours to decide, your empire or your neighborhood family. What if I choose my family? Then tomorrow all of Los Angeles will know what kind of man you really are. Rick left there trembling with rage and fear. Valentina wasn't playing games. She was at war. Rick had decided he wasn't going to stay away from Dove and Sophie. Let Valentina do what she wanted. But Valentina didn't wait 24 hours. It was Monday morning when Dove's phone rang frantically. Mrs. Herrera, speaking from Benito Juarez Elementary. Did something happen to Sophie? Dove asked, her heart racing. Well, a lady came for her. She said you sent her. What lady? I didn't send anyone. An elegant woman, blonde hair, said she was her sister. Dove felt the world crumble. I don't have any sisters. Where is my daughter? She took her an hour ago. She had an ID. Dove hung up and immediately called Rick. Rick, they took Sophie. They took my girl. What do you mean they took her? A blonde woman, from school. It was her. It was Valentina. Rick felt his blood freeze. I'm going there. Now! He arrived at the school like a hurricane. The principal trembled as she explained what happened. The lady had fake documents, but very well made, said it was a family emergency. How could you hand over a child without verifying? Rick yelled beside himself. Dove cried uncontrollably. My baby! My baby! Rick's phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Hi, Rick. It was Valentina's cold voice. Where's my daughter? Where is she? Calm down. She's visiting an aunt. A very well-behaved girl, by the way. Valentina, if you so much as touch a hair on her head, I swear I'll... What? Valentina laughed. You're going to kill me? Do it! But then you'll never see her again. What do you want? I already told you for you to stay away forever. Okay, I'll stay away. But give me back my daughter. Your daughter, Valentina mocked. How quickly you change your mind. Suddenly a small voice was heard in the background. Dad? Dad, is that you? It was Sophie, crying. Dad, help me! This lady scares me! Rick's heart broke. Sophie had called him Dad, instinctively, without a doubt. I'm coming, Princess. Daddy's coming for you. No, Sophie cried. I don't want to be here. I want my mom. Valentina abruptly hung up. So sweet. she said sarcastically, but the girl stays with me until you make the right decision. Tell me where you are. When you're ready to say goodbye forever, I'll send you the address. The line went dead. Dove collapsed into Rick's arms. My baby, my girl. We're going to find her, Rick promised, tears in his eyes. I swear we're going to find her. But inside, he knew Valentina was crazy. Completely crazy. And crazy people are capable of anything. He immediately called Daniel. I need you to contact all your contacts in the police, all of them. What happened? They kidnapped my daughter. The answer came 2 hours later. A message with an address in Beverly Hills. Rick didn't wait for the police. He took his truck and sped off like a bullet, with Dove beside him praying softly. Please, God, let her be okay. Please. They arrived at a large, elegant house with high fences. Rick rang the doorbell frantically. Valentina opened the door, smiling. You got here faster than I thought. Where is she? Rick roared. Inside, watching cartoons. Very calm, by the way. They ran inside. Sophie sat on a plush couch, her eyes red from crying. Mom! Dad! She cried, seeing them. She threw herself into their arms. Rick scooped her up as if she were made of glass. You okay, princess? Did she hurt you? No, but she said mean things about you and Mom. Dad, did you come for me? Sophie asked, her eyes wide. I'll always come for you, princess, always. Are you really my dad? Yes, my love, I'm your dad. Sophie smiled for the first time in hours and hugged him tightly. At that moment, the police arrived. Daniel had pulled every string he had. Ah, there she is, Dove yelled, pointing at Valentina. She stole my daughter. Valentina laughed as the officers approached. You're not going to be happy, she shrieked hysterically. That girl isn't yours, Rick. You'll never know for sure. What are you talking about? One of the police officers asked. She's crazy, Dove cried. She's been threatening us. But before they could arrest Valentina, an unknown man appeared at the door. Brown-haired, around 40, with a serious face. Excuse me, he said, addressing Rick. Are you the father of Sophie Herrera? Who's asking? Rick replied, hugging his daughter tighter. I'm Michael Torres, and I think we need to talk. Dove went pale at the sight of the man. Michael, what are you doing here? I came because I heard there are doubts about Sophie's paternity. Rick felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Who are you? Michael looked him directly in the eyes. I'm someone who was also with Dove 7 years ago. Silence fell. And I think Sophie might be my daughter. A week later, Rick, Dove, and Sophie were at the lab waiting for the DNA results. Michael had insisted on being tested too. Sophie played with her dolls, oblivious to the tension in the air. Can we go home now, Mom? The little girl asked. In a little bit, my love. The doctor came out with 3 envelopes in his hands. Mr. Denver. Rick stood up, his legs trembling. The results are ready. He slowly opened the first envelope. The DNA analysis between Rick Denver and Sophie Herrera shows a 99.9% probability of paternity. Rick almost fainted with relief. She's my daughter, he cried, embracing Sophie. I knew it, I always knew it. Dad, Sophie cried excitedly. I'm really your daughter now. Dove wept with happiness, but Michael didn't look defeated. Doctor, what about my test? Mr. Torres, 0% probability. You have no genetic relation to the child. Michael was silent for a moment, then looked at Dove. But I was with you too, Dove. You know it's true. Dove looked down, ashamed. Yes, it's true. Rick froze. What are you talking about? Michael smiled bitterly. Dove hasn't told you the whole truth, friend. What truth? That after you left her, she and I were together for a few months, and when she got pregnant, she didn't know who the father was. Rick looked at Dove, his eyes full of betrayal. Is that true? Dove couldn't meet his gaze. Yes, it's true. Why didn't you tell me? Because I had a test done when Sophie was 2. I wanted to be sure before I told you anything. And what did the test say? that she was yours. She always was yours. But I was afraid that if I told you, you'd think I doubted you. Michael approached Rick. I came because I thought I had a right to know, but now I see I was wrong. Why didn't you show up sooner? Because Dove asked me not to. She said you had come back and that it was better this way. Rick sat down, overwhelmed by the information. So, you knew she was my daughter for years? Yes, Dove whispered, but Rick was afraid to tell you. That night, after Michael left and Sophie fell asleep, Rick and Dove sat in the living room to talk. Forgive me, Dove said, tears in her eyes. Forgive me for not telling you the truth from the beginning. Rick looked at her for long minutes in silence. Were you afraid? I'd judge you. I was afraid of losing you again. When you came back into my life, I thought that if you knew I had been with someone else, that I had doubted. Dove. Rick took her hands. I abandoned you. You didn't owe me fidelity. You had every right to rebuild your life. But I fell in love with him out of spite, because it hurt so much that you had left. And I left because I was a coward, because I let Valentina manipulate me. They fell silent, processing years of pain and misunderstandings. Do you forgive me? Dove asked. Do you forgive me? I already did a long time ago. Then I forgive you too, but no more secrets, okay? No more lies, no more fears. No more, Dove promised. And what's next? Now we're a family. You, me, and Sophie. Do you love me despite everything? I love you because it's everything, because we went through hell and we're still here. What if we make mistakes again? Then we'll make mistakes together. At that moment, Sophie appeared in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. Why are you awake? We were talking, my love. Sophie came closer and sat between them. You're not going to fight anymore? No, princess. Not anymore. Are you going to give me a little brother or sister now? She asked with that innocence that disarms them. Rick and Dove looked at each other and laughed. First, we have to get married, Rick said. You're going to get married? Sophie shouted excitedly. If your mom wants to, Rick replied, looking at Dove. Dove Herrera, will you marry me? Yes, she said, crying with happiness. 1,000 times yes. Sophie hugged them both. Finally, I have a complete family. Finally, Rick repeated, kissing his daughter's forehead. 3 months later, Valentina was sentenced to 2 years in prison for kidnapping. Michael moved to San Diego and never bothered them again. And Rick, Dove, and Sophie moved into a house with a garden where their daughter could run and play. A house where birthmarks were no longer a mystery, but a blessing that had united them forever. A family born of pain, but now living in love forever.